You were there on Good Morning Britain on the day, the morning after the Winfrey interview aired. We had a pretty lively series of exchanges on that show. As you know, I left Good Morning Britain the next day because I was asked to apologise for disbelieving her claims of racism. I said I wanted to see evidence of this so-called racism. We now learn from Harry's own mouth that they did not call the royal family racist after all. So I'm not quite sure why I had to leave my job. Are you?
Yes.
Well, go on. Why?
Because they actually didn't use the words racist.
Oh, please.
And would you like me to finish?
No, I'll tell you what I want to do, Tricia. Before you go any further, I want to play you what they said on Oprah. Then you can repeat what you've just said. Let's watch this.
And also concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born.
What? About how dark your baby is going to be?
Potentially, and what that would mean or look like.
What was that conversation?
That conversation I'm never going to share. But at the time it was awkward. I was a bit shocked.
Yeah, and the end of that first clip of Meghan Markle goes on to say that if the baby was too dark, that would be a problem. Yes, you may think that. So that I'm afraid, Tricia, that is racism.
Hang on just a minute.
The charge is...
Let me finish my question.
Let me finish my question. The charge was racism against the royal family. At the time, they produced no evidence. Her version of events was nearly 2 years after Harry's timeline
Piers,
for when this happened. They've never named the royal member who said this stuff. And now we get told casually it's not racism.
All right, can you just play that again? Because there must be something wrong at my line. I didn't hear either Harry or Meghan use the word racism. I heard you use it. I saw the press use it. I didn't actually hear them use the word. And that's when we had that robust exchange of words, I think what I said to you is that I do get fed up with other people labelling, white people, labelling what is and isn't racist to black people. Now, if they'd actually used the word racism, I would be agreeing.
Trish. Honestly, this is utterly ridiculous.
So what is racism?
She was asked I'll tell you what racism is. I'll tell you what racism is.
Oh, good. Hang on,
I know I'm white.
Let me get comfortable. Let me get comfortable.
I know I'm white.
Piers Morgan's about to lecture a black woman about racism.
No, I'm about to tell you.
What's racism?
I'm about to give you an example of racism as a middle-aged white man who I know is the enemy to you.
Because you know.
Let me tell you what an example of racism is. An example of racism would be somebody expressing concern about the skin colour of a baby from a mixed-race marriage, and when the interviewer then says, "What if it was darker? That would be a problem." Yes, you may think that. That is an example of somebody expressing racism, and that became the headline and narrative for the next 2 years after the interview. And for you to shamelessly sit there and pretend that wasn't what they meant is utter bilge.
If there were more black people in the media, in the tabloid media, they may have had the opportunity to look into that and explain it a little bit more. I didn't see it as racism. I saw it, and that's why I got cross when you decided to label it
I didn't decide to do anything.
When we were having
that exchange, they literally confirmed to Oprah Winfrey that a member of the royal family had expressed concern about the skin colour of their baby, and if the baby's skin colour was too dark, that would be a problem.
When a black person attempts to talk about this in other than headline news, when I'm trying to have a reasoned conversation, I get shouted over. Why is my experience, or what black people experience, why do we have no currency? Why am I not allowed to explain
They've literally had front-page headlines about the racist royal family for 2 years. How much more currency does Meghan Markle want?
No one has called the royal family racist. I mean,
for God's sake, honestly, this is ridiculous.
I would say it's built on the Commonwealth, and we already know Charles has had problems. They've talked about the crown that Camilla may or may not use because the history of one of the diamonds, the Koh-i-Noor diamonds, and what have you. We know that the royalty and many royal families around the world were built on the backs of slavery, racism, Commonwealth countries having goods stolen or taken taken away from them. We know that. Unfortunately, it's not taught in school.
Sorry, that's got
so
nothing
people
to
are
do.
ignorant of
Sorry,
that.
yeah, but with Patricia, that has nothing to do.
The history is racist.
Yeah, you can't just speak endlessly without me jumping in. Sorry. With great respect to you, you can't just keep talking. I'm allowed to ask questions. It's an interview, right? My question for you
but
is,
you're not allowed to make statements without listening to what somebody says.
Meghan Markle made a direct charge, supported by her husband, that a member of the royal family had expressed concern about the potential skin colour of their baby, which, if it was too dark, would be a problem. That is racism. They made a charge. Yes, that's called racism, yeah. If you think that if a baby's too dark, it's a problem, that's called racism. Sorry to have to lecture you about racism. I know I'm not allowed to as a white man, but actually, that is an example of racism.
Everything. Tell us about my history. Tell us about the history of black people and what's
that got to do with what they said?
Because they didn't say it was racism.
Yes, they did.
Somebody else used that word. They stepped aside from using that word, I think, very deliberately.
Why did they win an award?
Tell us about unconscious.
All right.
Tell us about unconscious bias.
I'll tell you about unconscious delusion, which is they won an award.
No bias. What does it mean?
I do the questions, you do the answering. It's called an interview show, right? Just before Christmas, they accepted an award for their heroic stand against the structural racism of this royal family, based on what they told Oprah Winfrey. That was all a complete lie. There was no racism, we now know. They never meant to say it was racism. You're supporting them. That was never meant to be racism. Queering the colour of a baby from a mixed-race marriage and expressing concern if it was going to be too dark is not racism. Trish, you take me for a complete mug. It couldn't be a clearer example of racism. Why deny that?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, so am I right in thinking that you know better than you? I have no idea of what racism is.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I said to you very clearly.
Sorry, that you are more.
What you keep doing,
learned.
Tricia, what you keep doing, you keep putting words into my mouth I'm not actually saying, and the viewers aren't stupid.
Well, that's
can hear
what
the
people
conversation.
did with them. They didn't use racism.
You want people to believe that actually what she said, Meghan Markle, to Oprah Winfrey, supported by Harry, does not constitute racism. And I'm afraid everyone watching this will think you are being deliberately either delusional or disingenuous. Which one is it?
You haven't explained what you understand by unconscious bias, so I'm not quite sure you understand.
You're not doing the interview, I am. No, I don't care. Sorry. We've now moved from racism to unconscious bias. Right?
Yes.
I would like to move to unconscious or conscious delusion. Right? Because we all know what she said to Oprah Winfrey. We all know that for the last 2 years, the royal family has been reeling from the charge of being racist because one of their senior members expressed concern over the skin colour of their unborn baby. And now we get told casually by Harry, clearly feeling a bit of remorse about what's gone down here, because I read the whole book today. This story doesn't appear in the book. This allegation of racism isn't in there. Why? Where's it gone?
Why?
Nor is the allegation where Meghan Markle, which is the other thing I queried at the time before I had to leave the building. I also said, where is the proof that she went to somebody at Buckingham Palace about her suicidal thoughts and was told she couldn't get help? That's not in the book either. Where's that gone? And by the way, what happened to him at the same time when his brother allegedly attacked him? He called his therapist who was on speed dial. Why couldn't he do that for his wife? Anyway, these are ponderous questions for you to think about, Tricia. I want to come back after the break.
Well, joining us are the royal correspondent for Vanity Fair, Katie Nicholl, and the Sun, who I think has been whizzing through an entire copy of the book. Is that right, Matt? This is a Spanish version, as I understand it.
Yeah, I've had the enormous pleasure of reading the book.
Exactly. Well, you don't sound as if it was a pleasure. Tell us what you found.
No, it was. It's an incredible book, and I think you've gone through some of the main headlines here today. But I don't think I've ever read a royal book of so many revelations. And the most important thing here is there's so many revelations from a member of the royal family. And I think that's what the issue is here. There are, as Katie will tell you, there are many, many royal books. She's written some herself, but there are many books. But the problem here is that a beloved member of the family, like a treasured brother of William, a son of Charles, he's the one that is actually airing all this dirty linen. This is the problem that the royal family are facing, because there's all sorts of stories, all sorts of revelations that come out about the royal family. The problem is that a senior member of the royal family is actually making these accusations, but also revealing the private lives, the private conversations, situations with Kate and William that would normally be behind closed doors, or normally that journalists would not be allowed to report on, or if we tried to report on them, we were told it was too private. But as I say, we have a brother of William and a son of Charles that is actually making these things public, and I think that's the most aggravating element of this.
I mean, there is so much to say. We've already learnt so many extraordinary things from this book. What is a single story, if you like, that jumps out at you the most, that left you with a jaw dropping? I can certainly tell you what my take on it is, but I'd love to hear from you.
Well, the ones I think it's about Harry's life. It's about his drug taking and losing his virginity. I mean, these are things that members of the royal family don't normally talk about. You know, he's talking about his time in the army, in Afghanistan, where he was saying that he killed 25 people of the Taliban. But it's this opening up of his personal life, about the sordid tale about him losing his virginity behind a pub, and about his cocaine taking, and he's opening up elements about where he was hallucinating and talking to a bin. I mean, these are really deeply personal stories from Prince Harry.
Just unbelievable, Matt. I mean, Katie, where do we begin? How shocked are you by these revelations? I think after the sort of the Netflix documentary, you sort of thought, what else is to come out?
I think I said that, didn't I? Now I'm feeling really silly, because I didn't think that he was going to go anywhere near where he's gone. I mean, I completely agree with what Matt's just said. I mean, I've done this job now for nearly 17 years. You know, he's not the first member of the royal family to write a book, but he is certainly the only member of the royal family to have written a book this explosive. I mean, those bombshells just come thick and fast. And I think we've almost become oversaturated by Harry and Meghan and this narrative. There's just so much of it. But actually, if you try and just forget the docuseries, and if you try and put that Oprah interview to a side and you just come into this book, the idea that a senior member of the royal family would write a book like this, I mean, I would say is unthinkable. You really have to stop and think, I cannot believe what I'm reading, particularly, by the way, Isabel, the account of him losing his virginity. Unless that's a dodgy Spanish translation, I am astonished.
It is jaw-dropping. There's language in there that I'm not even sure we want to repeat for a family programme. I mean, look, you and I sort of generally have a pretty dim view of talking about Harry and Meghan the whole time, but we both agreed that this show can only be all about Harry and Meghan for tonight only, because it is utterly sensational, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, the Oprah interview was jaw-dropping, but that did focus on a sort of a short period. This spans his entire life, and I think for me, having written biographies about him and spanning those early years, it is fascinating.
You raised the question, Katie, about what's believable, and is this all believable? I mean, there were serious questions about what Meghan said in the Winfrey interview. So how much of this really is believable? Or is some of it just exaggerated?
Unlike Matt, I've not had the privilege yet of reading the entire book. I mean, one inconsistency that jumped out immediately was Harry saying that after he'd been allegedly shoved to the ground and had this physical fisticuffs with his brother, his first call was to his therapist. Well, my first call would probably be to my other half. But the fact is, the other half had said she wasn't allowed to see a therapist because it wasn't a good look for the royal family.
Right.
It wasn't. But actually,
how does that
Harry has a therapist on speed dial.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure we will pick over the narrative and there will be discrepancies. And I suppose we ought to point out the obvious, which is this is one person's side of the story. There are always two sides to the story, but unfortunately we're not going to get to hear the other side of Charles's narrative or William's, because they're not going to go there.
Let's just come back, because he has read the whole thing. I have two quick questions on that. We haven't heard much so far about what Harry has to say about the Queen and any conversations that he had with her. So I wonder if you could tell us a bit about that. And also, can you just elaborate on that bin story you told us about just now? You referred to Harry hallucinating, talking to a bin. I think we need to know more of that.
Yeah, we'll be hopefully putting more in the paper very shortly. But there are scenes that he has written about taking some drugs while at Eton, and it goes into quite a lot of detail about hallucinating with some friends, rolling spliffs, and talking to a bin that talks back to him, and it's like opening up a kind of scene as a teenager, addressing the kind of. But also, you speak about the Queen. I mean, Let's be fair to Harry, he's always been very respectful about the Queen, and he's very respectful about the Queen in the book. You'll be seeing later that he does talk about his trip to say goodbye to the Queen, as in he talks about his trip where he went to Balmoral. There's an epilogue that I think you might be aware of, that he'd written the book over the summer. It had been signed, it had gone, but he's written an epilogue talking about when he learnt that the Queen had died, the conversations that he had with the King, and flying up without Meghan, and then saying a personal goodbye to his grandmother. And that's quite touching. Again, it's a very personal story that he is revealing a lot of detail about the moments that he had with the Queen, with the Queen at Balmoral. But you're right, he's not gone in much detail on revelations about the Queen, because I don't really think that's tasteful, or there might not be any, but there are scenes where he is talking in his epilogue about being with the Queen at Balmoral.
I'd like to hear all the detail in the paper tomorrow. Thank you very much, Matthew. And
where do we begin? What was in his mind when he thought that it was right to reveal these extraordinary details? Did he think that in the modern world it's good to reveal details about your drug taking and your virginity?
He did, because one of the things that struck me is where he says in one of his televised interviews, and we've seen the clips of them, I don't think anything can be improved by me keeping quiet. I mean, just how stupid is he? I mean, Katie, how thick is Prince Harry? Sorry to ask a blunt
question. Well, he didn't do terribly well in his A-levels. I mean, we know that. And he didn't go on to university. He went into Sandhurst. But I don't know. I suppose a lot of people will be thinking he is incredibly deluded to have done this. I mean, the idea that he says in one sentence that the door is open for a potential return, I'm assuming for a reconciliation, that he believes in the future of the monarchy, is so incongruous with what he's doing and the impact of his words and what the impact of those words is having on the monarchy. It's almost like he is just deluded and lost in his own world.
We'll have to talk about what's he trying to achieve with all of this.
I think
apart from earning a load of cash.
Well, I mean, clearly he's gone for the big bucks. I mean, that is indisputable, and you're not going to get a $35 million book deal without spilling the beans,
haven't they?
They've certainly got their money's worth. They certainly have. But I think there was a genuine desire for him to tell his own narrative, to tell. I mean, I was told and have been told many years his truth, his and Meghan's truth. But I do think he has felt unheard for a very long time. And just to play devil's advocate just slightly here, that idea of being the spare is something he has struggled with for a long time. I have met Harry on many occasions. He said to me before in the past, you know, I want a normal life. I want to get on the tube. I want to go and be able to buy a coffee. I want to be able to do this. He wanted everything that he didn't have, that wasn't within his birthright. And I'm afraid he has wanted all of the privileges of being royal and none of the responsibilities. And the underlying sentiment in all of this